Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast on the Genre Equality channel. I'm Hitzer.
Maisel.
This episode, we're going to be talking about a streaming service that is, owned by the richest man alive, the richest man that has ever been alive, Jeff Bezos. But yet, weirdly enough, doesn't have like the reach and the popularity and the pull of a Netflix or of a Disney Plus.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about the streaming service, Amazon Prime Video specifically. I gotta say, like straight off of the bat, right? We've talked a lot about Amazon Prime shows, and
Yep.
I think the reason is because Amazon Prime has a greater hit ratio than most other streaming service. It may
Mm.
not put out the 500 shows a week that Netflix does. It may not have the IP that Disney Plus does,
Oh yeah.
Um, but I think like pound for pound, show for show, there's almost never a miss with Amazon Prime, and I fucking love the service. So we'll be talking a lot about some of the underrated shows that we haven't highlighted before here on either Genre Equality or Behold. I mean, if you listen to Genre Equality, you know that we've talked about The Boys quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very popular show. It's a hit show. We've talked about Undone, me particular. I
Yeah.
remember giving Undone a 10 out of 10 review a few years back. Plus, we have an entire episode sort of dedicated to Fleabag as well. Um, what else am I missing for Amazon Prime that we've talked about?
They've rescued a couple of shows with
The
with the
Expense.
Expanse.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, we praise the Expense like every year, lah. And the most two recent seasons were on Amazon Prime, which I feel were some of the best seasons so far, at least visually.
Yeah. Amazon Prime occupies this very interesting space at the moment, right? Not only
Yeah,
for rescuing kind of like abandoned hits,
yeah.
but also like in the superhero category, they've got a very fascinating kind of take on the superhero genre with The Boys, of course, as we talked about, and Invincible as well.
Invincible, another big hit for the streaming service, and that show is clearly, getting a lot of buzz these days. Some of the buzz is from me as well. I really, really love the show.
Yeah.
Steven Yen, once again having a big ass year with
Mm-hmm.
Invincible. J.K. Simmons is on that, so really, really cool. So yeah, like I said, like so many huge hits or so many good shows, and not all of them hits, but so many good shows coming out of Amazon Prime, and we're here to highlight three of the quote unquote smaller ones. They may have a lot of critical recognition,
Yeah.
but not a lot of like popular viewership.
Mm.
But before we get into those shows, I would like to take a couple of moments to remember the life and career of one Michael Kenneth Williams, most popularly known as Omar Little
Mm-hmm.
from The Wire. If you want to listen to our episode about The Wire, we talked a lot about Omar as well. You can listen to that on Behold. The man tragically passed away the morning of this recording.
Yeah.
Um, Man, the guy, I of course, I became familiarized with him due to his iconic performance as Omalito on The Wire. But upon looking at his filmography, I've come to realize that Michael K. Williams
Mm-hmm.
is a bit of the MVP of HBO, shall we say?
Yeah.
He is. If HBO were ever to build a Mount Rushmore of actors on that fucking network, Michael K. Williams would be on that because of The Wire, because of Lovecraft Country, because of
Mm-hmm.
The Night Off, because of Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah.
These are huge influential shows from that particular network, and Michael K. Williams it belongs up there with James Gandolfini, etc. What are your, what was your reaction to finding out that Michael K. Williams so unfortunately passed, and what are your thoughts on his career?
Oh man, I was just like last week. I had actually bumped The Wire up in for a rewatch.
Oh,
I know it's gonna take a while, right,
yeah.
to kind of do that. But I was reading about I can't remember what I was reading about. Basically, it was like an article talking about The Wire, and I was like, okay, I think it's time to kind of rewatch that because it's been a while. It's been a while since like even we had Charlie on board to talk about them on that particular episode of Behold.
Yeah, a year ago.
So yeah, waking up this morning and finding out the news, I was kind of like, oh man, damn.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I didn't really know like what to say or how to respond to that
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but it's incredible the kind of performance that he had as Omar Little, right? Like you immediately
Mm.
associate that face with his performance over the what was it, like 6 years of the Wire that the Wire was being shot and being put out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think like it's a big kind of loss to the industry as a whole,
Mm,
you know, and I rue all the possible roles that he could have played.
mm.
I really loved him in a lot of other things as well. I think Boardwalk Empire stood out for me
Whew, he
particularly.
was great in that. Yeah,
Yeah, and like a ton of other stuff that he's been, 12 Years a Slave, Lovecraft Country, which we've also talked about as well.
yeah, just last year, you know.
Yeah, so our condolences to you know, his family and his friends, and may he rest in peace.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we're all fans of Omar. I keep wanting to say Omar, but his name is Michael K. Williams. You know,
Yeah.
but he's best, of course, best known for Omar. Like, if you want to check out something that is not The Wire,
Yeah.
that he was a part of, a show that I fucking love and doesn't get it near enough credit for, is The Night Off. Starring
Oh,
Riz Ahmed, which
yeah.
is one of the best mini series that HBO has ever put out.
Hmm.
He's really great. He was in a great mini series called When They See Us as well in 2019, done by Eva DuVernay.
Hmm.
He was in a few episodes of that. I mean, all in all, what a stellar career, you know. Like, if there's one thing that he shouldn't be ashamed of is his work on TV
Yeah.
and his work in films. Just one of the best actors out there, and like I said, he deserves to be right up there with James Gandolfini in terms of, you know, the Mount Rushmore of HBO, and
Hmm.
that's saying a lot because, you know,
Yeah.
HBO is just, I mean, in terms of like networks that are on TV, you know,
Yeah.
that's not on the internet, like
Yeah.
HBO is primo lah. And Michael K. Williams is one of those big stars there. So R.I.P. Michael K. Williams. You know, you made a big impact in, at least in my pop culture forays. And as well as me personally, like his face for like a couple of years now is my screensaver on my iPhone.
Oh,
Um, and it still
really?
is. It's not going away for a while. Like, yeah, it's a portrait drawing of Omar Leto. So yeah, R.I.P. Michael K. Williams. Um, we're gonna be segueing now into the shows that we want to talk about. In particular, we'll be beginning with a show by Amy Sherman Palladino of Gilmore Girls
Hmm.
fame. The female Aaron Sorkin herself has crafted an incredible comedy about stand-up comedy called The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Later on, we'll be talking about what I can only describe as an incredibly lewd, super funny pregnancy rom-com in Catastrophe, a show that is anything but a catastrophe. In fact, it is my favorite show of all the shows that we're talking about here this
Oh,
week. And finally, we'll be talking about Tig Notaro's tragic, tragic comedy,
yeah.
dramedy, One Mississippi, which has a lot of shades of, I would say, baskets in it. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's begin with Amy Sherman Palladino's smart new Spitfire heroine in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. You know, and as I mentioned, Amy Sherman Palladino is best known for her work on cult favorite shows like Gilmore Girls
Hmm.
and the sadly underrated Bun Hits. You know, she's the queen of sharp and savvy female protagonists on television.
Yeah.
And with all due respect, I love Stars Hollow. I love Lorelai. I love Gilmore Girls. But I think Marvelous Mrs. Maisel might be her most winsome creation to date.
Yeah.
Um, her new series just doesn't present, you know, Sherman Palladino's like first foray into streaming with Amazon. You know, it also expands her scope beyond her small town storytelling forte. You know, it's set in 1958 New York City. It stars Rachel Brosnahan as Miriam Mitch Maisel, who first begins her journey as an unrelentingly cheery, upper middle class Jewish housewife,
Yeah.
striving to be the quote unquote ideal woman of those traditional mores, you know, that those like 1950s mores or customs dictate. Like at first glance, Mitch seems content to play the doting wife and mother to her sad sack aspiring stand-up comic husband Joel Maisel, and two slightly off-putting children. Um, her her life appears, you know, charmed and vibrant, even as she studiously fits in her exhausting and kind of hilariously absurd beauty and fitness regime into her daily routines. But soon enough, her picturesque life falls apart when Joel's plagiarized, humorless stand-up routine bombs, and she discovers that he's having an affair with his empty-headed secretary. Um,
Mhm.
even her parents seem to blame the dissolution of her marriage on Mitch for not being perfect enough. You know, it all seems bleak until one night Mitch drunkenly walks into a decrepit village comedy club and stumbles on stage. You know, once the spotlight is on her, she proceeds to unleash her frustrations in a profane, engaging, lewd, and unendingly funny moment of raw nerved catharsis. It may have been an accidental tirade against the world and against her husband, but it's also one hell of a stand up routine and a
Mhm.
million times funnier than anything her husband dreamed he himself could be. And that's when she's discovered by a misanthropic club employee, an upstart manager, Susie Meyerson, who recognizes that her mix of improvisational instinct and observational wryness and impeccable comic timing could be something special. Um, we should be surprised by her sudden detour into a stand up career given how the show begins. But truthfully, the audience has already caught on to her talent very early on, like from the show's very first scene where, she's confident and vivacious. Mitch kind of makes a side splitting toast at her wedding, right? That's the first scene,
Yep.
to her day-to-day interactions with friends and family. We can already tell that she's a naturally funny storyteller, quick on her feet, always ready with her wisecrack. She's written brilliantly, but it's lead actress Rachel Brosnahan's extraordinary performance that imbues her with this witty rapid fire lines that have warmth and verve and occasionally fury. That's how the show begins, and subsequently the marvelous Mr. Maisel delves into her struggling and then kind of successful career as a stand-up comic as the season goes along, as the seasons goes along in season 3 right now. um you were introduced to the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I remember, later on, not
Um.
like not so late that you missed out on season 2, but before season 2 began, but after season 1 ended.
Yeah.
I think I introduced you to Maisel when we were recording an episode of Genre in my house, and then I put it on because I was just like, the show is great, you all should watch it.
Yeah.
What do you think about Maisel now that you've had like a few years to kind of stew with it?
Oh man. I remember binging through season one shortly after. Well, at that point in time, there was only season one. And I was happy to hear that season two was out, but I just never got down to it. So now that
Mhm,
I'm caught up with season two at least. I haven't done season three yet.
mhm,
It's still I rewatched season one, then going to season two and all. It's still even rewatching it, right? Like what stands out for me is definitely the stand up bits for sure. That
mhm.
continues to be, iconic. I think the first time she goes out on stage, by far is the most memorable one. Maybe just short of the other one that she does when the family's on holiday.
Yes, yes, at the
Oh my god,
Catskills.
yeah,
Yeah,
that the one where Abe is in attendance. Yeah, I
yeah.
think that definitely edges out top place for the stand up bit that I like the most.
Mhm,
From all of that, but on top of that, like I think it's a very interesting and well put together look at what not just what stand up is like, right? But like using stand up and the whole industry and the process of creation within comedy itself to take a look at a woman trying to find her voice and trying to find her identity, not only as a stand up, as a comic, as a mother, as a divorcee, maybe.
yeah, yeah, sort of a
Sort
divorcee.
of,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and through all of the various complications of her life, her family, her culture, and this is just the greater society that she finds herself in.
Yeah.
Comedy becomes this incredibly cathartic
Mhm,
um outlet for her, or at least it is in the beginning, until she finds
mhm,
out that it's actually work. And
mhm.
her just kind of like working through all of that is incredibly charming. I think like the dynamic duo of both her and Susie, and,
Yeah.
and the kind of relationship they have is frustrating and incredibly endearing at the same time.
Mhm.
But more importantly than that, I think like I keep coming back to the idea that there's this moment where Susie goes for advice, right? She goes to the uh, I can't remember what the club is called, but yeah, she goes to find advice and she's like, "Yeah, I'm a personal manager. So what do I do now?"
Mhm.
And I think across, well, the two seasons that I watched, it's consistently about that, right? Like the fact that nobody really knows what they're doing
Yep.
necessarily, and they're just trying to find their way through that. And it is in the doing and the making of mistakes and the just kind of stumbling about, that you discover these moments of kind of like brilliance and kind of glory on stage and like triumph in personal life and relationships. And that to me makes it feel like a show that's worth celebrating.
Yep.
There's a great balance of both like the humor aspect of it and the very deeply personal drama portions that I find extremely compelling. Like I do wish like she did more stand-up bits, or rather that was more highlighted across the
Mm-hmm.
seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But it's understandable when you take a step back and see that she needs the show needs to show you what her life is like and where she's at, for her to extract the humor and the comedy from that, and see how that she turns into a successful set.
Yeah, yeah. The thing about a comedy about a comedy is that it has been kind of done before.
Oh yeah.
The sad part about those previous comedies about comedy, I'm gonna poke again. I'm sorry if you're like a long time listener, I fucking hate this show, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip by Aaron Sorkin,
Yeah.
which was about an SNL type show where at the end of every episode they show the sketch that they've been trying to plot out and discussing the merits of the jokes and all that, and then at the end it always ends with like a wet fart because the sketch itself is not funny. Aaron Sorkin is not a comedian. Like, he doesn't
Hmm.
know how to do sketch comedy or stand-up comedy, and that's the big difference with Maisel here. And I think at the end of the year we'll be talking about a show called Hex as well, which is probably my number one show of the year, which is similar, a bit of a more contemporary dissection of the stand-up comedy
Yeah.
circuit and scene and the people behind it. You brought up a good point about why it's important to not just showcase the stand-up sets of Rachel Brosnahan. It's important to showcase her life because it's converse. Like, it's
Hmm.
inverse. Like, the more difficult or depressing her life gets, the more hysterical and eye-opening her sets become.
Yeah.
Like any good comedian, she has to mine personal misery for
Hmm.
public hilarity, and more than simply kind of inciting barrels of laughs. Her incisive anecdotes also feel like the typical Amy Sherman Palladino kind of feminist rallying cry, which plays even more potently in an era like the 1950s. Early on in the show, she kind of proclaims, why do women have to pretend they're something they're not? Why do we have to pretend to be stupid when we're not? Why do we have to pretend to be helpless when we're not helpless? Why do we have to pretend to be sorry when there's nothing to be sorry about? And that's kind of what the show is about. Sure, she kind of stumbles along the way as she learns the craft. Like you said, she
Hmm.
soon realizes she can't wing it all the time. This is an art form. Um, and she has to balance a new job and being a single mother. But our collective desire to see her succeed, to root for her, is
Yeah.
overwhelming, and
Hmm.
that's a huge credit to the level of investment Brosnahan's captivating performance gives, and Sherman Palladino's wonderful writing invokes. Palladino is kind of famed for her exorbitantly long scripts. A Sherman Palladino episode is said to be, at least by the actors in interviews, have said to be at least 15 pages longer than a regular hour-long episode of TV.
Oof.
Um, I mean, her scripts are famously filled with dizzying dialogue exchanges, blistering quips, abundant pop culture references, and I think Sherman Palladino is in the peakest form here. She's the most Sherman Palladino she's ever been. She might even be sharper than what was considered her prime Gilmore years, because this uncensored streaming format
Yeah.
allows her to push boundaries and use language that she could not use on the CW or the WB. And it's great to see Sherman Palladino kind of like let loose and see what she can do with the freedom of streaming. Do you agree?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Just like being able to let loose like that, right? You can't. Mrs. Maisel is a completely different creature from Gilmore Girls,
Mm,
and just the fact that she has this opportunity to just like shine, do basically whatever she wants, in the
mm-hmm.
telling of this story, like really, really does. I really enjoy what she's done here. Like this is definitely one of my favorite shows. Um, just within this particular genre for sure. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Sherman Palladino has done an amazing job. And I'm glad that we live in an age where she is allowed to explore all of that.
Yes, definitely, man. Any final thoughts about why people should watch The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, we've talked about all the kind of good things, but there are like kind of small things also that really kind of add a lot of value to that. The
Yeah.
set design and dressing is phenomenal.
Oh,
right?
beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, it's not period costumes per se, but the costuming is fantastic. The set design is fantastic. Everything seems like, it's from that time. Everything has its right place, from the lighting and the way that it's shot. It
Mm,
really, really does feel that we were in the 50s for that. In addition to that, the song choices spot on, right? Like just
yeah.
having these oldies come on, oldies
Mhm.
to us now, of course, but like
Yeah.
oldies come on at like the perfect kind of emotional moments.
Mhm.
Just adds to all of that. Like it's not just about the fact that it's a good story with great dialogue and a fantastic kind of stand-up bits. Like as a package, like
Mhm.
this has pizzazz and polish. And like the punchline always hits. And I mean, you can't really ask for more than that when it comes to a show about stand-up comedy.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is such a sterling showcase, not just for Palladino's writing, but for the costuming and the music and the set design. It's so immersive. It puts you in the 1950s, but it has this vibrancy and color that makes it different from, say, a Mad Men
Oh yeah.
version of the
Hmm.
1950s. Primarily because of she's different. She lives in a different area.
Yeah.
Her life is different. And a great showcase of this one particular woman's self-discovery and liberation via the unlikeliest of means. And Mitch is a very driven and strong-willed and ambitious heroine with a very filthy mouth that could make a sailor blush. And it would be a shame if you missed out on her journey. So if you haven't caught up on the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, as with all the other shows here, catch it on Amazon Prime. Highly urge you. It actually is the cheapest of all the streaming services.
Yeah.
It's 199, right?
Hmm.
Um, it's I mean, why not? It's a couple of bucks. It's really nothing. It's a nasi
Yeah.
lemak like on a morning.
Yeah. In addition to that, all the shows we're talking about, and The Expanse and Invincible and The Boys and all that, we also have upcoming to the Amazon Prime streaming service, The Lord of the Rings show.
Next year, oh
Mm.
man, that looks like Jeff Bezos spent a good chunk of. I mean, okay, for him probably not lah, but for us, it's a good chunk of change as well. It
Yeah.
looks
At the
incredible.
moment, I think it is the most expensive TV show ever made,
Mhm.
going up to, if I'm not wrong, 2.8 million per an episode.
Wow,
Uh,
really?
yeah, they've surpassed Game of Thrones in terms of the average amount of money that we spend per an episode. So we will see. We will see. I mean, like it's a solid like writing team and directors and all of that.
Mhm.
So I'm very curious to see. But like Amazon Prime does have a lot of things going for the moment.
Hey, if you want your high fantasy fix, you don't even have to wait for Lord of the Rings.
Oh
The
yeah.
Wheel of Time next month,
Oh yeah.
debuting on Amazon Prime. That looks great too. It also looks very expensive, but Jeff Bezos can fuck it up.
Yeah, yeah. With everything everyone has been buying on Amazon, I am not at all surprised.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like I traditionally don't like like super uber wealthy elite capitalists and all that who can go to space on a whim,
Yeah,
you know. But he saved the expense because he personally liked the show, and I was like, okay,
I
I like yeah.
going into this episode, I was deeply conflicted. I do feel like there's a lot to be said about him being the
Mhm.
richest man in the world, and a lot of those are my own kind of like personal feelings about wealth distribution and politics, etc., etc. But I mean, you can't deny the fact that like a lot of that money has given us like a lot of great entertainment.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's one checkbox in his role, I guess, in his column.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Definitely, and Maisel is one of those boxes that you have to check once you sign up for the uber cheap 199 monthly streaming price. So why not? Next up, we'll move on to a show that if Fleabag didn't exist, and technically, Fleabag is a BBC show that Amazon bought.
Yeah,
Much in the way that Expanse is a sci-fi show that Amazon bought.
yeah.
So if you want to talk about real original programming that started on the ground floor with Amazon, Catastrophe is by far my favorite show on Amazon Prime, like
Mhm.
bar none, including the expense and everything else. It's one of the smartest, most charming, funniest shows that you'll see at any time of your life. It's a sitcom about an American man played by Rob Delaney
Yeah,
visiting London who meets an Irish woman played by Sharon Hogan. They flirt, they launch a week-long affair, not quite a one-night stand, rather like a 7-day 24/7 fuckfest stand.
yeah.
And then she discovers that she's pregnant, and then they decide to give this relationship thing a go. Um, not only do they decide to give a relationship a go, they decide to get married. The premise sounds like rom-commy and far-fetched,
Hmm.
but you know, since when have those two elements kind of prevented enjoyment?
Yeah.
The key here is this show is, I think, even more than Maisel, of for a minute per laugh basis.
Yeah.
The level of the number of jokes and the volume of it and the velocity of it, it is so incredible. It's probably the best funny, like the most like, we love a lot of dramedies, your Atlantas and all of that, but just for a pure funny quotient,
Yeah.
Catastrophe is anything but a catastrophe. It's one of the funniest shows out there. It's super delightful. Some of the jokes are so insanely vulgar and lewd and un-PC that you can't believe that it's on TV, it's on
Yeah.
a streaming service. But at the same time, it's the kind of jokes that you would kind of make with your significant other too. Like in bed or at home. It's just like private angers and frustrations and observations that you would make, and there's a certain level of authenticity to the dialogue, to the relationship, to the messiness of both these characters.
Mhm.
Um, it's a warmly vicious and viciously warm sitcom that's extremely acidic in its tone,
Yeah.
but very warm in its heart. You've gotten through, season one and about half of season two.
Yeah.
What do you think of Catastrophe so far?
Oh man, I mean, like, I didn't think I would like the show, but like, I fucking love the show. It's so good. It is so good. Like, just to your point, the density of laughs and drama is
Hmm.
insane. Like, I don't know how you keep that up. And at no point in time, and I'm like, a fair bit through everything. At no point in time is anything played for laughs just for the sake of playing it for laughs, right?
Hmm.
Like, it is organic, and within the scene itself, it makes sense in the story, it makes sense for the characters as well. And like, they just nail it every single time. It is insane the kind of chemistry that Delaney and Hogan have on
Hmm.
screen.
Yep.
And like, in addition to that, the side characters are hilariously funny.
Hmm.
And it just adds to this in I don't know how to say it. Like, it feels like such a charmed life,
Hmm.
if I could say that, in terms of the fact that it is so well infused with humor,
Yep.
whether vicious or well-meaning or unintentional.
Yeah.
That it I mean, it's like, man, I like, does anybody live that kind of life? I don't really care, because I feel like I'm living vicariously to the fact that, like, people who may perhaps live lives like that amidst all the problems and issues that they have to kind of sort out and work out, and just trying to navigate these things that two people would just never prepared for.
Yeah.
um and yeah, so like, so far, Catastrophe for me has been an entire hit. It has been such an easy watch, despite the fact that, again, it is fairly dense in terms of like the repartee, the quibs, the witticisms that come in and out, and the self-referential humor that gets more and that gets increasingly present as we go along
Hmm.
within this season itself. So I love this show. I really do love like some of the side characters as well. I think like the mandates that Rob has with Chris.
Yep. Yep.
Is
Sharon's brother, right? Yeah.
No, that's not Fergal's Sharon's brother.
That's right. She's Sharon's friend. Yeah.
Yeah, Sharon's best friend's husband.
Yeah. Quote
Yeah.
unquote best
Oh,
friend. Yeah.
was yeah. I mean, like, hilariously funny. So good. Like, it's just like a laugh a minute.
Mm-hmm.
It feels good, but at no point in time, like, the drama, the humor never downplays the drama, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the humor never downplays the issues as well. It might be coping mechanisms at times. It might be just their way of expressing themselves of either like love or disdain, or hate in some areas, but it's always well-meaning in that manner, and it's nice to see, them capture humor as a means of communication in that
Mm-hmm.
way. I think it's a rare thing to see it done on TV, and for it to be done this well,
Mm-hmm.
is outstanding. I really, really enjoy Catastrophe.
Catastrophe is one of the special kind of sitcoms that, like when Isa mentioned that there's a certain heightened level of reality to it, it doesn't mean that it's unrealistic in the way that Friends is
Oh yeah.
unrealistic.
Hmm.
Like Friends, it seems like they lead a different kind of charm lives where they don't have to worry about money or rent or and stuff like that. Like these characters feel real because they do worry about money and rent and how to take care of themselves and their children and their jobs and everything else. What it seems almost wish fulfillment fantasy is the repartee between the two of them.
Yeah.
How they can get past troubled patches with just like the funniest of jokes, and almost self-effacing jokes at that too. It's very, very, very good, and also very, very good in its depiction of the messiness of marriage, the messiness of relationships.
Hmm.
As you get into season 3 and season 4, it goes into a bit more dramatic territory. It still remains just as funny, but it deals with a lot of other things. You kind of hinted at Rob's alcohol addiction, his alcoholism, which hasn't been touched upon in the show just yet, but it
Hmm.
will be. The troubles at raising two children, family troubles. And by the way, speaking of family, everyone in the cast, the side characters are great, even from her friends in school, like Sharon's friends in
Oh
school,
yeah.
Fergal and all that. But I mean, the highlight of the show has to be, in terms of side characters, has to be Rob's
Oh
mother,
my god.
the late Carrie Fisher. This was her last role
Hmm.
prior to her passing away.
Yeah.
In fact, the last season actually coincidentally culminates with a storyline featuring her death and funeral,
Hmm.
which which was planned, but of course they had no idea that Carrie Fisher was going to pass away in real life, so it adds a level of poignance to its series finale as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, as Rob and Sharon, these two actors, they're so cheerfully lewd and crude and also intelligent and witty and kind
Wow.
to each other.
Yeah.
They are a rarity among lovers in sitcoms. They are mature people who don't spend a lot of time leering at other attractive people or engaging in trumped up Bano, like, oh, you forgot my birthday kind of squabbles.
Hmm.
The pregnancy simply forces a fast forward in their relationship, and they don't get to or have to go through all the getting to know you, deciding we're ready kind of stuff to that we expect to experience in real life or in entertainment depictions of having a baby. And the cross-cultural elements is also one of the delights of the show. It works very, very well. Rob's in advertising, he moves to London. She's a primary school teacher, and the show doesn't make Rob an ignorant American, but and her friends and family aren't these impeccably articulate snobs, as is the caricature of British characters.
Yeah.
Indeed, like nobody much cares for anybody in the group, but instead of hostility, like Sharon's brother, parents, and friends all insult each other and Rob with a very brisk, funny energy. And the primary glimpse we get of Rob's stateside family is, of course, as I mentioned, like Carrie Fisher as a recurring guest star as the mother, and
Yeah.
she's so amusingly cranky.
Oh my god. Yeah.
She just can't be bothered to get excited or upset over Rob's plans to stay in England and become a dad. She's just trying to find a way out for him.
Yeah.
It's such a great unique way of a unique sitcom that focuses on a marriage and a relationship. And again, like the density of jokes is just I wouldn't say it's quite Tina Fey level. Like it's not 30 Rock
Yeah.
that ilk, but it's close. And
Hmm.
if you get close to the light speed of Tina Fey, that's fucking fast.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's so cunningly woven into the drama and the characters, and the fact that none of the jokes feel inorganic. Like it's not just there because somebody thought of a funny joke.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the jokes are really funny to the point where I found myself like at certain moments like pausing the show to write down the jokes. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, no, absolutely. I spent a lot of time like just rewinding just to hear the joke again, just because it's so good and it hits you like you catch it's so fast that you catch the humor on a very kind of surface level. Like it tickles your funny bone, and it's just
Yeah.
like, oh my god, that was really funny, but I'm not really sure I understand the whole joke. Let me go back and just listen again. I found myself doing that a lot, which took me a fair bit of time to get through, like some of
Mhm.
the really funny bits.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's exactly like that.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. It's it's kind of this delicate balance of concepts, and they have these honest arguments, this very clever humor, and there's very deep compassion amongst the characters as well,
Hmm.
and how they merge that together makes Catastrophe feel identifiable and relatable. It's sometimes so real it hurts. The jokes are sometimes so funny that you can't imagine anybody like thinking about that on the spot, but that's the only level of like unrealism.
Yeah.
But then again, like Rob Delaney in his real life is a comedian, so who knows? Maybe there are some people like that who can just think so quickly on your feet, and you admire them.
Yeah.
And there's so much joy in the show. The comedy is first and foremost. This is not a dramedy. This is a sitcom. There is a joke factory.
Hmm.
It's masterful in that, and the beauty of that is that it doesn't have to sacrifice the depth of the characters for
Yeah.
laughs.
Yeah.
They
Exactly.
go together hand in hand. Yeah. Any final thoughts, or like what else do you like about Catastrophe before we got to move on to our last topic?
Oh, I mean, I think that pretty much sums it up. Like, big fan. I'm looking forward to continuing on the rest of the series.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like the jump from season one to season two, caught me off guard. The first episode, and I didn't think that that would be a direction they went into. But yeah, like
Mm.
totally sold on that. I've got like what two? I've got two more seasons to kind of finish up, and I'm very really really looking forward to that.
Yeah, yeah. The thing is, the time jump from season one to season two sort of led me to believe that they will do the same for the beginning of every season.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is that season three leads you to it's the reverse twist. Season three begins by leading you to believe there was a big time jump, and then it turns out it's just like mere seconds after season two ended.
Hmm.
It's great. It's great. Yeah. Again, Catastrophe available on Amazon Prime. Probably my favorite homegrown Amazon Prime show. That is not the expense of Fleabag, which were kind of bought from other networks and are now housed on Amazon Prime. Yeah, it's just wonderful. It's almost Fleabag level good, and that's very
Yeah,
very high praise.
it is. Hmm.
I'm going to be moving on to uh, the final show that we'll be talking about here. It's called One Mississippi. It's more of a traditional dramedy. In fact, it's more of a tragic comedy.
Yeah.
I caught on to Tig Notaro's brilliant dramedy One Mississippi a few years too late. Just last year, actually, a couple of years after it ended. But it's such a gem. It's a sensitive and empathetic show that mines subtle deadpan humor from grief and sexuality and trauma and family complexities, and the thing about One Mississippi is that it's so true. Tig Notaro herself admits that this is a very autobiographical show, and she minds a particularly bad year for her in which her mother died.
Yeah.
She almost died. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she turns all those real life points into breathtakingly tender TV. One Mississippi is one of those very kind of low key treasures.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have the kind of like pizzazz that Maisel has. It doesn't have the kind of like laugh a minute factor or immediate vibrancy that Catastrophe has. But the more you watch the show, the more you kind of fall in love with Tig Notaro and her fictional counterpart Tig Notaro.
Yeah.
It's great, and it joins the ranks of those like uh sad comedian dramedies, which are so overtaking TV at the moment. What do you think about One Mississippi? Because I didn't give you like any preface. I didn't tell
Nope.
you what it was about. Like what were your thoughts going into it, and now after watching a season and a half of it, what do you think?
Yeah, I love Taro. I like coming into Mississippi. I didn't really know you didn't give me any preface to that.
Yep.
Um, I mean, like it is it's such a personal work,
Hmm.
right? Or at least you believe it to be a personal work. From everything that she says, and every time she kind of launches into her own little story time, right?
Hmm.
It really does come across as an intensely personal thing. There is a lot of dry wit and humor here that um that drives the well, maybe not drives, but yeah, there's a lot of dry wit and humor here that kind of belies some of the deeper issues and troubles that she has to navigate while she's doing all of that.
Hmm.
Sorting out her relationships with her late mother, with her fight with cancer, with her stepfather, with her traumatic childhood,
Mm.
growing up, and all of that. But yeah, it is a fascinating look at how someone works through difficult relationships and trauma in their life, like having to come back from LA to Mississippi and just like unfold and unpack all these parts of her life that she may have left behind at one point in time,
Hmm.
and using that at the same time to kind of like, tell a story, and it kind of feed into this, not necessarily coping mechanism, but like a form of therapy for her, is immensely compelling.
Hmm.
Just the way that she goes about that, like, and in addition to that, like, her imagination is kind of through the roof. I think like the little parts where whenever she has one of her trips, my
Hmm.
one favorite one in particular is the one where she's in the graveyard.
Yeah, yeah.
It is, yeah, it's funny and it's laugh out loud, but at the same time there's a seriousness to it, to kind of like remind the audience that these are real situations that real people go through.
Hmm.
But at the same time, that does not mean like it's all doom and gloom and it's all end of the world. There are ways in which you can cope and can survive and can overcome,
Mm.
and find closure within that. And for me, that's like the main kind of core draw for One Mississippi, is just how she works through that, right? And along the way, through the working through of her problems and her relationships, other people begin to heal as well. And
Mm.
like much like her journey through having cancer, like the story plays out in much the same way.
Yeah.
And some of the revelations are just kind of like out of the blue, right? Like you think that, okay, I get the sum of what it is she's going through,
Yeah.
and then they drop a new bomb on you, and it's like, oh my god, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's always in good, not good faith necessarily, but it's always optimistic
Hmm.
without like shoving that in your face, right?
Mm.
Like her character in and of itself, yeah, she comes across as cynical and a little bit jaded, but there's always a shred of hope, and that
Mm.
especially comes through with every time that she decides to tell a story on the air.
Yeah.
That and just like her music tastes are just like absolutely
Hmm.
phenomenal. Really, really love that particular part about it. I feel like, if I were to do a radio show, I would love to do a radio show like that.
Yeah. Yeah, very personal, very storytelling oriented,
Yeah.
raw and authentic, like if you have seen Tig Notaro's 2012 stand-up performance, like
Hmm.
stand-up comedy special live,
Yeah.
live was like largely One Mississippi. That's the story of her personal crises. Like this is just
Yeah.
a more excuse me, a more fictional, observational retelling of these traumatic events in her life, and it's a formula that works very well because it's so personal, therefore it's so authentic. She plays a character called Tig Notaro.
Hmm.
It's obviously based on herself, but she isn't a stand-up comedian on the show. As
Nope.
Isa has alluded to, she is a host of an NPR type style radio show where she shares personal stories from her life. It's a cool framing device, I think, that allows you to connect with the themes of this show
Yeah.
a bit more directly, and takes monologues almost hypnotic. Like I want to close my eyes and just like listen to her. She has a really, really great voice. One of the characters. Well, one of the best things about the show, though, it's not just about Tick. It's about a lot of the other people in her life.
Oh yeah.
She has crafted a very interesting, empathetic, weird father figure in Bill, who almost serves as the de facto star of the show. Like his slowly developing backstory, his weird cadence,
Yeah.
his and everything. Like, and the more you learn about Bill, the more sympathy you have for him. The more you learn about her brother as well. In fact, season 2 is probably it's probably the best of the One Mississippi seasons, and it focuses on all three of them equally. It's a trio of beautiful love stories that take different trajectories. Tig is falling in love with her street producer, which is a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
um, Bill has his own finds a love interest as well, as hard as that is to believe, because Bill's so weird at first, but his kind of emotional core serves as a great linchpin for the show. And her brother is great as well. And the writing by both Tig Notaro and Diablo Cody, who you may know from Juno,
Yeah.
is beautiful. Not in just in terms of its insightful perspective and its very grounded voice and its very dry humor, which all of those like shine through every facet. But in terms of the emotional core of it, the overall feel that I get from it is both warm and sweet, but cynical and realistic about the troubles that
Yeah.
that normal people go through in their life. It's never better than when it's balancing the real world with what is going on in Tick's head. It's brilliantly evocative, and there's so many cool, like like the devices to get you into a hits, whether it be a monologue, so whether it be dream sequences.
Hmm.
They're all really interesting ways to get you to understand Tick and her world and her point of view better lah. It's so easy to look at someone who had, who lost a mother, who had cancer, breast cancer, and then mastectomy, and then going to remission, and then she had pneumonia, which almost killed her. But then to see it play out in such, I don't want to say undramatic ways, but the show makes a point of like underplaying things.
Yeah. Hmm.
That makes it feel incredibly authentic and relatable and direct, and the method also establishes a precedent for Tick to interact with her memories that leads to some of the bolder scenes down the line.
Yeah.
There's like nothing otherworldly about One Mississippi, but Tick's grieving process feels very real, and then you move on to other things about Tick that makes her feel insecure, makes her feel like down. There's talk about this was filmed obviously during the Me Too movement of 2016, and a lot of the episodes, especially later in season 2, talks about sexual harassment in the workplace,
Hmm.
about lesbian relationships, especially being in one Mississippi, which is way down south,
Yeah.
of a very red state, shall we say, and Dick is not that way. It's very great, but it doesn't ever portray the people who live in Mississippi as like ignorant hicks. Also, like everybody seems to be very fully fleshed out and three-dimensional and empathetic in ways that you could never imagine. And Tick is just one part of that fabric.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else do you think about One Mississippi? Like, what other like bright spots of it?
Oh man, the family dynamics
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
fascinating. It's
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. Like, I personally see a lot of reflections of people I know, whether within my own family or within those of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And like those moments are so well played out.
Yep.
Like the arguments they have, the sarcasm that gets thrown around. Bill's just like stoic, I guess,
Yeah. Yeah.
demeanor, and like the slow breakdown of that stoicism,
Mm-hmm.
as he really does try to like make amends, and to I believe in one episode he says it's to make right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so heartening to kind of see that effort there, as kind of like a stepfather who wants to step up, right?
Yep.
In the absence of his partner, his wife, and
But
the kids' mothers, um,
mm,
and having this very fascinating kind of observation, no study of
mm-hmm.
what adult relationships are like within families,
Mm-hmm.
as complicated as the Bavaros themselves. It's a joy to watch. It is
Mm-hmm.
complex and nuanced and well acted. And at no point in time, it feels real.
Mm-hmm.
And that like keeps me kind of rooted to my seat. Like there's so many things to like about this, but there are just these moments that are just like spot on. Dinner, dinner conversations at the table,
Yeah.
just kind of like the strange moments of support, or the struggle to support each other as they kind of work through their grief,
Mm-hmm.
and all the revelations that come like spilling out after their mom's death.
Mm-hmm.
It is very hard to tear yourself away from that. Just like
Mm.
watching how well these characters are crafted and acted and relate to one another. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. One of the defining aspects of Tick, like has been hinted at early in the show, but I think you haven't gotten there yet, is the molestation that she suffered as a child.
Yeah,
And a bit of a Bill's complicity in it for not believing her or not helping her stop it. As well as her brother's complicity in it as well. Like they didn't participate in molestation, but they should have known better and protected her more.
yeah,
And a part of her resentment comes from that. Part of Bill's coldness and resistance to inability to offer the warmth and comfort to take is also part of his guilt of feeling that as well, and it's very well played and very underplayed.
yeah,
um yeah, it's just such an underplayed show. Like I don't know whether like that excites you, but it should, because it makes it feel real and very very grounded in a way that Maisel and Catastrophe is not.
yeah,
you know
for sure, for sure.
yeah. How far into season 2 are you right now?
Let me see. Uh, it's the episode about the crystal.
mm,
So that's 2 episodes into season 2, I
okay,
believe.
okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I believe like in the late season 1 and early season 2 is when she's beginning to develop a relationship with her producer Kate, right?
yeah. I think by that point in time, it's really, really clear like she has a thing for Kate. Uh,
Yes, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So they had the Christmas party already. So that's
Yeah.
that's episode 1 of season 2.
Yes, her relationship with Kate, who is self-described straight but kind of bi, a baby Gala, shall we say, is
Yeah.
one of the best aspects of season 2, as is the slow unraveling of John Rothman's Bill,
Uh huh.
who's great at portraying him. Bill is sort of like this stoic fortress, very prim, very proper, but the more you get to know him, the more you understand how he came to be.
Yeah.
Bill kind of reminds me a lot of uh Christine from Baskets.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
In a way that you don't kind of get them at first
Yeah.
until you really get them.
Uh-huh.
And in a way, like One Mississippi reminds me of a Baskets quite a bit in terms of its dramatic leanings.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely not as
Mm.
landish. No, not outlandish.
Yeah, I mean, some of the shows that we talked about in the Atlanta episode, because Atlanta is very magic realism. There are a bit
Yeah.
outrageous moments here and
Yeah.
there. But on the flip side, there's the kind of the Baskets or the One Mississippi type of dramedies that are very, very rooted in reality.
Yeah. Yeah. That is definitely tonally very different from the other 2 shows that we talked about, but no less enjoyable. I mean, like if you want something like grounded and character driven, and just like great music all around as well.
Mm.
Like One Mississippi is really, really worth a watch.
Yeah, one of the controversies that One Mississippi could not avoid was, in fact, one of the reasons why Tig Notaro was so cool with the show ending was because she wanted to distance herself from Louis C.K., who is a co-creator of the show.
Yeah.
In season 2, there is a very thin. The thing with season 2 is there was this plot line about one of the executives at her radio company, who basically, in an interview, took out his dick and started masturbating.
Hmm.
This was a year before the revelations about Louis C.K., who did the same thing. So we didn't know at the time that Tick was sort of referencing that lah,
Yeah.
about her former boss, Louis C.K. And you didn't know, and it plays much differently today. At first it seems a bit unrealistic, like who would ever do that and think they can get away with it, and then you realize that someone actually did do that and got away with it for decades.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it plays very differently. But sadly, it got cancelled after season 2. So you have only 2 seasons of this to watch, and very quick seasons as well. It's just like 10 episodes each. Catastrophe is probably the quickest watch that you can have because it's 6 episodes a season, half an hour each. You gotta love the Brits, man, and they're leaning towards brevity.
Yeah.
They always leave you wanting more, and I do want more. Maisel will continue. It's one of Amazon's biggest Emmy hits, in
Hmm.
terms of like it just keeps Brosnahan and Palladino and the lady who plays Susie Myerson is they keep getting awards, so it
Yeah.
will keep giving you more seasons. So yeah, these are the shows that you should be looking out for on Amazon Prime. And in addition, of course, we've already talked about Undone and The Expense and Fleabag and The Boys and Invincible. Oh my gosh, so many good shows.
Yeah.
Is there anything else on Amazon Prime that you like that I have not like caught?
Oh man. I think recently those are the ones that I have been watching largely. I don't think. Oh, has there been anything?
I
Hmm.
I can't think of anything. I mean, Good Omens we talked about quite a bit also.
Yeah,
That was pretty good. Jack Ryan is a fun show, but it's not great.
as in, oh right, the Clancy one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the one with Jim from The Office, John Krasinski, is Jack Ryan. That one.
Men in High
Tales from
Castle.
Man of High Castle, yeah, but that one is a bit of a guilty pleasure.
Okay.
Um, what else? Tales from the Loop, I enjoyed quite a bit
Yeah,
also.
we've talked about that on genre. Yes, we have.
Yeah.
We talked about that on genre.
One great miniseries that I failed to mention also, Good Omens was really great.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yes. Did we talk about good moments? I think we did.
We had a fairly long review about that. I think I gave it like
Uh
7.5 or an 8. So yeah, quite a high
yeah.
rating.
Well, shout out. Amazon also picked up RWBY, which was like this kind of indie 3D animation from way back.
Mm.
That
That's
become
Rooster Teeth, right?
yeah, with Rooster Teeth, and then like now it's on Amazon Prime as well.
Ah, yeah,
So they
yeah.
picked that up as well. I don't know.
Is
Is there anything else in particular?
is that pronounced as Ruby or WBY?
I believe so, but then
Okay.
there's a dispute about that. But I do believe it's called Ruby.
Okay, okay, yeah. I felt like some people call it RWBY and some people call it Ruby, but yeah, I wasn't sure which was the correct one.
Is
Oh
Sneaky
yes,
Pete?
Sneaky Pete is Amazon Prime. You're right. Yeah. Sneaky Pete is really good, especially its first couple of seasons
Yeah.
were excellent. The first season of Homecoming, starring Julia Roberts, it was created by Sam Esmail,
Hmm.
who most famously created Mr. Robot. First season of Homecoming is phenomenal. I would recommend it as well. In fact, I should have included that in this one. But
Uh,
oh well,
yeah.
for shout out to Homecoming, which I really really like. He had a terrible season 2, but season 1 was fantastic.
Yeah. Honorable mention, Homecoming. Maybe we'll talk about it another time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The second season of Homecoming was not by Sam Esmail. Like they changed showrunners, so it was meant to be like an anthology type of show.
Uh huh.
So yeah, new showrunners every season, so the quality is hit and miss. Lah. But the first season is the one with Julia Roberts. Ooh, fucking fire. Yeah. So those are all visuals on Amazon Prime that we would like you to watch, particularly these three: One Mississippi,
Hmm.
Catastrophe, and Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I will be back in a couple of weeks to talk about some classic film noirs, but specifically my favorite film noirs of all time.
Yep.
Have you caught any of them yet?
No, I have not, but it's on my list of things to clear before our next recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I don't know. It's been a while since I've done film noir, so
Hmm.
I'm trying to see how much film noir I can actually take in a sitting.
Right.
It should be pretty interesting. Like I big fan of all like many of the modern iterations of film noir, everything that has
Mm.
borrowed or pays tribute to and all of that. Big fan of
Yep.
Blade Runner and so on and so forth as we've gone on and on about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of excited to revisit the classics,
Mm-hmm.
just to get a bit more of a feel of where everything kind of came from.
Mm. Definitely, yeah. Once you watch these films, you see how much how influential they are in terms of the development of film noir. All the films are picked up from the 40s and the 50s, so they are super classic.
Yeah.
They're from the dawn of cinema, and then we'll be back, of course, for genre equality, where we'll be talking about what are we talking about? I kind of forgot what our main topic was. Oh, Star Wars Visions
Oh yeah.
coming out soon. I'm very excited for that. A mix of anime and Star Wars.
Yeah.
The animatrix of Star Wars, shall we say? Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Yeah.
Which mixed feelings about, but I was it garnered enough goodwill for me to give it a good rating.
Yep.
What if, which is airing its zombie episode tomorrow? I'm very excited because Marvel Zombies is very famous.
Yes, it is.
Um, Mike Flanagan's new show, Midnight Mass, is I don't know anything about it. Um, I haven't seen trailers. There
Yeah.
are trailers, but I haven't seen it. I don't know what the premise is, but Mike Flanagan sells me on anything that he does.
Yeah.
Hill House, Blind Manor, Doctor Sleep, and all that. We've talked about that.
Yeah, he's had a lot
Um,
of hits.
he is one of the best horror people working today. Adventure Time Distant Lands as his final episodes. I'll talk about that. We'll talk about My Hero Academia, which will
Hmm.
be ending its season soon. I'm going to be talking about how I was very disappointed in the new Candyman.
Oh,
And finally, pull list, I'll be talking about. I don't know how I'm going to cram this into 5 minutes, but I'll be talking about like 20 odd Isaac Asimov books, and I
yeah,
will try to do it as
yeah.
quickly as I can. Yeah.
Well, if it comes down to it, we can always, start that as a kind of like a preamble, and then we'll continue it on a whole episode of Behold, just talking about Asimov.
Mhm.
in the future. We do have a fair bit of sci-fi stuff coming up for us as well. So why not, right?
Yes, yes, of course, and you can look forward to that. And if you want to know where to find us, we are on YouTube at the John on Equality channel. We are on Mixcloud, Spotify, Apple TV, not Apple TV, sorry, Apple Book Podcast,
Yep.
Google Podcasts, etc. And wherever you find your podcast, we will be there. Also, our friend Chris Fogg recently released the first episode of Asian Nightmares, right? That's
Yep.
the title,
Yep.
which is the first episode is The Water Corridor. It's an audio drama, fictional audio drama that's about horror stories in Southeast Asia. Our friend Chris Fogg is a playwright and a screenwriter, and this is his first foray into audio drama, so you should definitely check that out. You can find that on our Bandcamp.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's genreequalitychannel.bandcamp.com.
Mhm.
Yeah, and as well as Spotify, you can find him on same platforms that you can find either Behold or Genre Equality as well.
Yes, definitely. Just search for Asian Nightmares or for The Water Corridor, which is the title of this episode. And the second episode will be coming out soon in a couple of months, right?
Yeah, I think we're supposed to sync up with Halloween and all of that. We'll probably get
Hmm.
Chris on another episode of Behold, probably the
Hmm.
Halloween one, to just kind of talk to us about, the writing process and inspiration and all of that and why he wanted to start that Asian Nightmares in general.
Awesome. Yes, till then, guys, check us out on all the podcast platforms that we just talked about. I've been Hitzer.
I'm Isa.
Goodbye.
Ciao.